I find it extremely hard to imagine how any creationist could possibly doubt the fact of evolution.
We wouldn't want to teach something in the public schools that was factually incorrect simply because some people believed it was so.
Well, you know, mainstream science throughout history has been challenged by questions, and that's how we make advances in science, is being open to all different perspectives.
Life cannot arise by itself. It's over, it's done. The science supports creation. It supports God.
Things that was hard to do before, like arguing against evolution, isn't as hard because of the knowledge that I got from Rick Oliver.
He showed me a lot about how, like, what we believe and what's in the Bible is actually true, and we don't have to believe, like, the lies that are out there that have no evidence.
I highly recommend Dr. Rick Oliver. He's an amazing world-class scientist and a wonderful human being who truly loves the Lord and desires to see his people equipped in this area. Dr. Rick Oliver, he's the greatest.
My PhD is in evolutionary biology, but within that field I am a specialist in herpetology, which is the study of amphibians and reptiles. And, you know, he was talking about all the degrees, and, you know, I have a lot of degrees. I really tried to make a career out of going to school so I didn't have to work, but it didn't work. So I ended up, I also set out at age 14 to prove that my mother, my family were all wrong when I told them that Jesus was a myth and religion was for weaklings. So that's why I have 2 master's degrees. I belong to all these associations. I was on the board of directors at UC Santa Cruz. I belong to the California Academy of Science, the National Academy of Science, the New York Academy of Science, the American Herpetological Society. See, God doesn't need all that. And I'm not here tonight to prove or disprove anything. God doesn't need me to prove his word. His word stands nicely all by itself. But what I want to do is offer an alternative and just let you know, it's okay for us to have different opinions. That's perfectly legitimate. And you know, God created every one of you with a purpose, and he gave you a brain. And it's up to you where you fall. In other words, you know, my worldview right now is that I am a Christian, a creationist. But until 1 month after my 40th birthday, I was an avid anti-Christian. I wasn't an atheist. That was too passive. See, I wanted to hunt the Christians down and convince them of their being wrong. I taught high school for years. I taught at the university. And, you know, I gave lower grades to some of my students just because they were Christians. And they challenged me in my classroom. So I had a real guilt trip when I finally accepted Christ in 1987, when I realized there was a God and I wasn't him. That's a big step, I'm telling you. And guys, to find the truth, you need to ask the person who wrote the book. So you pray, you ask the Holy Spirit to decipher it for you. And that's where you will find the truth, not from somebody like me, some scientist. There's a cliche, you won't get to heaven on your mother's religion. Well, you won't get there on my science either. But the other thing is, God didn't create you as a robot. He created you as individuals. And guys, you need to have all of the information to make a decision. Unfortunately, one of the reasons I came out here, my wife and I have been on the road now speaking since June. And the reason for that is I saw, when I would go to schools, and whether they were public schools, Christian schools, whatever, students that were being taught what to think, not how to think. And the reason for that, it wasn't that the teachers, had some agenda. It was just that they were bound by the law. And that's the part that bothers me. I believe we should teach everything, creation and evolution. My PhD is in evolutionary biology. That makes me a professional evolutionist. See, I know evolution works. I've seen it work. I can make it work because I've evolved into the creationist I am today. You see, evolution isn't a dirty word. It just means change. It's when we put micro and macro in front of it that we get into trouble. So we need to be careful there. But one of the things we need to do is put on the full armor of God. Because, you know, when I first became a Christian, I was really prepared for the enemy. But I forgot about putting on the full armor. Some of the worst, most vicious attacks I've had have come from within the Christian community. So make sure you put on the full armor, and the only way you do that is by putting your nose in God's word and asking him to protect you. I wanted to start with this. This is one of the things that's really caused me a lot of heartburn over the years. The National Academy of Science came out with this resolution in 1976, folks. 1976. This is just part of it. I didn't have room to put the whole resolution. But basically, it says scientists should be allowed to follow the evidence of their research wherever it may lead without fear of retaliation. Guys, that's not happening. I have a lot of friends who are afraid to mention that they're creationists. I have a lot of friends, and I could name a whole lot of them, who have lost their jobs, their fellowships, everything, just because they spoke out and stated that there might be an alternative to this Darwinian evolution. Guys, they lost their job. And so there's a real fear. But this resolution was written in 1976 to protect the scientific community from the Christians. Because at that point, we were really making some advances scientifically and especially technological advances. And we were so sure that we were going to find that final empirical evidence that would slam the door on those ignorant Christians, as we put it. And so we were afraid that they would try to interfere with our research or try to cover it up. Guys, it's just the opposite. And that's hard to admit, that we've actually covered up evidence or we have faked evidence. And guys, that just breaks my heart. Now, there's a real difference between empirical evidence and hypothetical or theoretical evidence. Empirical evidence is evidence that can be tested and confirmed. It can be observed. It could be given to other scientists, and they can get the same results. And that's the difficulty. Because I asked a whole room full of scientists down in Southern California this question. I said, can anybody in this room, and now remember, this was 600 scientists in this auditorium. I said, can anybody in this room give me just one empirical example of Darwinian evolution? Guys, the whole room was silent because there isn't any. See, how would you empirically prove spontaneous generation? You can't. How would you empirically prove the Big Bang? You can't. See, how could we empirically prove the amount of dust on the moon prior to the moon landings? See, they were prepared for a 50 to 100 feet thick dust layer on the moon, and when they got there, they found out it wasn't there. See, but we didn't know that till we got there. We then had empirical evidence. And that's the part that we need to be aware of. It's okay for us to have different opinions, but it's not okay for me to inflict my opinion on you as fact. And this is the sad result of that. This is out of USA Today, back a couple years ago, but I can tell you right now, I could have spent 45, 50 minutes on just showing you the scientists that have been caught. And this guy didn't need to do it. This is one of the greatest scientists in the world. This guy did not need to do this. It says in May, Professor Wang-Wu Salk and his team published a landmark report in the journal Science announcing that they had created 11 lines or colonies of cloned human embryonic stem cells. That was back, when the Human Genome Project was going on. It says this achievement made South Korea a leader in the field of research. But unfortunately, on Thursday, Wang admitted that most of the supposedly cloned lines were fakes, and the fate of the others were unclear. Guys, that's the sad part about money and power and pride driving scientists instead of the search for truth. We can get so wrapped up in being first and getting that grant money and getting the accolades. See, that's why I did not want to be a Christian. Because I didn't want to believe in God, because I didn't want to be accountable to God because of my lifestyle. The other thing is I didn't want to share the glory with God. But, you know, it's okay if you tell me you don't believe in God because you choose not to. I can't argue with you. I can pray for you. I can feel sorry for you. But if you tell me you don't believe in God because of all of the evidence, now I'll argue with you because there is none. Guys, I want to tell you right now, we are dealing with two faith-based religions. I had great faith in man's word. Now I have great faith in God's word. And that's all the choices you have. You just need to choose where you're going to put your faith. And I get real tired of hearing people come up, well, what are you going to do about this? Scientists have proved this, and science has proved that. Guys, I got to tell you, what has science proved? You know, there's a brand new fossil that was just found. Turns out that it wasn't quite what they thought it was. You know, that the feathered dinosaur fossil that supposedly that, you know, National Geographic published dinosaur to bird turned out to be a fake. Guys, we haven't proven anything, and you sure can't prove anything with the fossil record. Not a thing. This was one of my favorite quotes. This is one of those quotes that I thought this would be my life quote. It says, attack the false idea, not the man who holds the idea. Boy, wouldn't that be nice if we could just live like that. See, it's okay to have different opinions. But the problem with this particular quote is, after a while I realized that, you know, my ideas are pretty firmly attached to me. So if you attack my idea, I feel like I'm being attacked. But here's the situation. We need to be careful. We need to not attack people or their ideas. We need to be able to understand and ask questions. I thought this was clever because you don't know the impact that you're having on things around you sometimes. So look at the impact this guy had and didn't even realize it.
Still power, not just for professionals.
See, we have to be careful because we can be like that weed trimmer. We can be thinking we're just having an impact on a little area, but guys, we can just be cutting the legs out from our friends and family. Hebrews 11:3 really gets it said. And this, I'll tell you, when I was a new Christian, when I first became a Christian in 1987, 1 month after my 40th birthday, I had a really massive guilt trip because I knew that I had broken all of the commandments. I'd committed all the sins, and I had stumbled people. I had given lower grades to some of my students, but I had a hard time. But grace was the most incredible thing. But I love this verse here. Through faith, we understand that the worlds were framed by the Word of God, so that things which are seen were not made of things which do not appear. Guys, the Word of God. He spoke it into existence. That's called creation ex nihilo. But look what he says. Through faith, we understand. Not through evidence. See, he says by faith. That's why I'm talking about two religions. Faith in the religion of man, or my science, or faith in God. This is the other thing that we need to be careful of. Just because you have a PhD doesn't make you all-knowing. My mother pointed out what PhD stands for, piled high and deep. But I found that really difficult when I saw the IPCC come out with this thing on global warming a few years back, and it said 2,500 of the world's leading scientists signed this document. First of all, about 60% of the people that signed it were just grad students, they were secretaries, they were anybody who worked on that project got their name put on there. A lot of scientists actually sued them to get their name off of it, but there was not one single climatologist that signed that thing. See, that would be like if you were diagnosed with a brain tumor and tomorrow you have to go to the doctor to pick somebody to remove it. Would you go to a podiatrist or would you go to a brain surgeon? You know, they're both doctors. They may have been first in their class, but you go where your expertise lies. So this, look at the date on this. This was New Science Weekly. This was July 2009. It says, to see Obama's new cabinet member, Stephen Chu, and by the way, this guy is a great scientist, with his Nobel Prize for Physics, making unquestioning pronouncements about climate change is equivalent to watching a sea captain step into the cockpit of an aircraft and decide to fly the next leg of the trip. Competence in physics does not make one or someone automatically credible in his opinions on any other science, whether it is biology, chemistry, or climate. So you got to be careful. Just because somebody walks out and says, "Oh, well, this is the great professor, boy," you know, that guys, you get me out of my realm, I can't even walk and chew gum. You know, my little pea brain does not handle quantum physics. So for me to then start giving you great lectures on quantum physics is ridiculous. But yet we fall prey to that all the time. Here's the other thing that I want to make clear as we get into it. We're going to get into some current empirical evidence. But guys, this is what caused all of this concern. Prior to Charles Darwin publishing his book in 1859, 99% of the scientists and the people believed that God created. But Darwin was mad at God. His daughter had died. He was so upset that he said, well, God wouldn't allow such things, so there can't be a God. So he went out with the purpose to find a way to take God out of the picture, a naturalistic explanation. Well, here's the sad part. Look at this book. In 1859, the book Origin of the Species by Means of Natural Selection was published by Charles Darwin. The subtitle was both equally important and revealing: the preservation of favored races and the struggle for life. Guys, you know, I had to go back to 1977. That was the last time this book was published with the whole title. Now, if you go to the Borders or the library, you'll find Origin of the Species by Means of Natural Selection. Boom, end of discussion. Guys, this is sad, because after this book was published, there were people who went out and hunted and shot Aborigines, had them stuffed and mounted, took them to the taxidermists and put them in a museum because they felt that they weren't quite evolved yet. They were less than. See, when you think that there is just random chance and you're an accident, then what is it that gives you your foundation for your morals? Where do you get it if there is no God? But here's the other sad part. Look, here's what he said. He went out with an agenda. The Old Testament, from its manifestly false history of the earth, was no more to be trusted than the sacred books of the Hindus or the beliefs of any barbarian. The New Testament is a damnable doctrine. I can hardly see how anyone ought to wish Christianity to be true. So you see, he had an agenda. And he even admitted that his theory was really weak, and unless we found more evidence, and particularly empirical evidence, and the fossil record was really incomplete, but he was sure it would come catch up and fill in the gaps. Well, guys, it didn't. So his particular theory turned out to be pretty well beaten up. The math has devastated it. I thought this was clever. This is from a Wall Street Journal. It says a Chinese paleontologist lectures around the world saying that recent fossil finds in his country are inconsistent with the Darwinian theory of evolution. His reason? The major animal groups appear abruptly in the rocks over a relatively short time rather than evolving gradually from a common ancestor. You see, the Chinese scientists know this. Our scientists know it too, but we just don't admit it. When this conclusion upsets American scientists, he wryly comments, in China, you can criticize Darwin, but not the government. In America, you can criticize the government, but not Darwin. Guys, I think we have it backwards. And people say, well, why should we worry about it as Christians? Guys, when you water God down, when you bring God down to your size, put him in the box like I did, I figured, well, if it's hard for me to understand or some of my great scientific colleagues, then it's probably hard for God. But, you know, if your foundation isn't built on solid ground, the building's going to fall on you, folks. Look what this is. Thorkel Grossbull is a Lutheran pastor, and this is out of his book, A Stone in the Shoe. He says, what is faith in a world where a technical scientific rationality has made it impossible to believe in the story of creation, a virgin birth, paradise, resurrection, eternal life, and what do you end up with? An out-of-date God. See, when you start watering it down and putting your faith in man's word instead of God's word, you end up in pretty deep water. Now, I've had people ask me questions all week long and everywhere I go, and I'll get them, they say, well, Dr. Oliver, couldn't God have used evolution? Well, there's no such thing as a dumb question, but that one gets real close. Because what is it God can't do? The only thing God can't do is sin or lie. The question should not be, couldn't God have used evolution? And by the way, that's theistic evolution, that God started it and then let it take its course. The question should be, did God use evolution? If you ask it like that, then you can read in his word and he tells you, no, he didn't. And the way I found that is, what sets us as humans apart from the rest of God's creation? We are created in his image. So if we are the only thing created in God's image, and he started us through this little cell, and we evolved through the primates, right on up through the apes into the humans, then everything was in his image at some point, and that's not what he said. So just know there are alternatives to all of the stuff you're hearing. But I found this rather humorous. The odds of life from non-life. That's one random act of mutation. But anyway, what mutated? What chemical mutated to create life? That's how Darwin said we spontaneously went from a warm little pond of chemicals into the first cell. By the way, the first cell was a plant, according to the Darwinian evolution, according to the schools. And then the plant had to somehow divide and become more sophisticated plant, and then it had to decide to go from being a plant to an animal. But look at this. This is September 2009, last month, in Astronomy magazine. It says, at some point in the dim past, non-living matter started to replicate itself. Scientists are still trying to figure out how. Guys, do you catch what that's saying? That is just absurd. Non-living matter started replicating itself? Maybe that's why we have so many rocks in Tucson, huh? Because they just keep multiplying. Guys, that's just ridiculous. But that's what you're left with when you take God out of the picture. When you remove the Creator, you're left with some really strange things, and this is one of them. The other thing is, right now, the main theory that's being circulated in the scientific journals is something called panspermia or transpermia. That means that aliens started that first life. And I'm not making that up, that's in the science journals. But why do you think we're reaching out there to that? Because Darwinian evolution is dead. Mathematically, it is over. See, in 1965, when I was in high school, the odds of one random act of evolution, that first cell from, life from chemicals, was 10 to the 50th power. That was just a number with 50 zeros after it. But by the time the 80s came around, the technology had increased to the point that now the math jumped up to, instead of 50 zeros, 40,000 zeros. Guys, that's absurd. Who wants to bet on that? 40,000 to 1 odds? Whoops. But it got better, because now, today, 2009, that number is now 10 to 10 to the 123rd power, folks. That's a number so big you couldn't write it on a piece of paper the size of the entire visible universe. That's what the odds are of just one act of random mutation creating life. So how do you account for multiple acts? You can't. It's mathematically dead. But if that's all you have, folks, you hang on to it. And then you resort to this type of thing. This is one of my heroes, Dr. Ernst Mayr. He was a evolutionary biologist, a colleague of Stephen Gould at Harvard. He passed away a couple years ago. But look what he said. He said, no educated person any longer questions the validity of the so-called theory of evolution, which we now know to be a simple fact. Guys, when did it become a simple fact? If it were a simple fact, I wouldn't be standing here. But the part that makes me the most upset about this statement is he's calling you, or calling anyone who doesn't believe evolution is a simple fact, a non-educated person, an ignorant Christian. Guys, that's just plain wrong. But it's not just coming from the secular side. It says many professors view their mission from Christian colleges as helping poor right-wing Christian children outgrow their parents' faith. It says we are trying to open their minds. That's what a college education is all about. Yes, we are Christians, but we have to challenge our incoming students' narrow fundamentalism in order to broaden their perspectives and make them well educated. See, that's what I said earlier. Students are being taught what to think, not how to think. Deductive reasoning, problem solving, common sense are thrown out the door. This guy got it right. This was one of my heroes, Dr. George Wald. He was a professor emeritus at Harvard and the Nobel Prize winner in biology. Look what he says. There are only two possible explanations as to how life arose: spontaneous generation arising to evolution, or a supernatural creative act of God. There is no other possibility. See what I told you? There's just two. Naturalism or creationism. Spontaneous generation, that's the Darwinian evolution, was scientifically disproved 120 years ago by Louis Pasteur and others. We just failed to heed it. But that leaves us with only one other possibility, that life came as a supernatural act of creation of God. But look what he says. I can't accept that philosophy because I do not want to believe in God. That's his right. I can't argue with him. He's an honest man. But here, a Nobel Prize-winning biologist, look what he says. Therefore, I choose to believe in that which I know is scientifically impossible, spontaneous generation leading to evolution. Guys, the scientific community knows it. We've known it for a long time. I talked earlier this week about carbon dating. Carbon dating, guys, for those of you who weren't here, carbon-14, every time I ask somebody how we date fossils, all I hear is carbon-14. I just want you to know that carbon-14 cannot date fossils. It's never been used to date fossils. It can only date artifacts. Look here, down here on the bottom, carbon-14 can only date, look, wood, charcoal, peat, bone, tissue, cells, groundwater, ocean water, glacier ice, only carbon-based items. But you see, it can only give you dates from 100 to 70,000 years. And I'll tell you right now, 70,000 is the far end, and most scientists won't stretch it past 10,000. So even if carbon-14 was the dating procedure that everybody says, how do you get a date of 3.7 million for Australopithecus africanus, Lucy? Or that brand new one, Ardipithecus, the one they just found. 4.7 million. You see, how about the T-Rex, the dinosaur, 65 million? You see, you can't get million-year dates with carbon. But yet people don't understand it. They just say, well, scientists carbon dated it. And here, I just wanted you to see this. There are problems with carbon dating, and we've known it since the early 60s. While evolutionary writers make confident statements about the place of the new skeletal discoveries in the history of human evolution, there is plenty of room for skepticism. The scientific community might assume an evolutionary relationship between humans and ancient primates, but still struggle to show a true relationship exists. That's the empirical. We can't do it. So it is wise to look closer at the evidence and question claims that our ancestors ever had feet with opposable toes. Because that's what these fossils that they have found, when they have actually found some feet, guys, it's just another ape. But yet, it's our link, it's our missing link. But see, this is from the scientific community. They know there are problems. Just wanted to give you a little example here. See this thing right up there in the top? That's an English bowler. That's a hat. It's solid rock, fossilized. So unless Neanderthal was a little more advanced than we thought, it didn't take millions of years for that to happen, did it? But the one I wanted to point out the most is this one right here. See this? It's an opal. I had some people say, well, how do you explain diamonds and opals? They take billions of years at deep pressure and under the earth. Look what this says. It says, despite the common teaching that it takes millions of years to form opal, Australian researcher Len Cram has long been growing opal in his backyard laboratory. His opal, shown below, is indistinguishable under the electron microscope from that mined in the field. He was awarded an honorary doctorate by a secular university for this research. All he does is mix together the right common chemicals. No heat, no pressure, and definitely no millions of years. You know, I have pictures of fossilized teddy bears, folks. I personally can fossilize or petrify wood in my lab in 1 hour, 60 minutes. See, it doesn't necessarily take time, it just takes the right conditions. But yet the students are not being told that. Here's another one. Look at this. Coal needs only weeks, not millions of years to form. It has been known for many years that the most important factor for coalification is temperature. The higher the temperature, the higher the degree of coalification or rank of coal. The length of time, look at that, is not particularly important. And pressure actually retards the chemical reactions. But see, the kids aren't being told that. The parents aren't being told that. The scientists aren't being told that. But we know it. It's been around for years. But you see, they use that to beat you up and make you think that, well, it's all been proven. Boy, evolution's proven, so boy, this book must be wrong. Guys, I got news for you. If there's something that you don't understand about this book, if there is a so-called contradiction, which there aren't, it's your problem, not God's. He already knows the difference. Now, I was on the board of directors for UC Santa Cruz, up in Santa Cruz, California. This man right here, Dr. David Deemer, I wish I'd have been as smart as he is. Look at what this guy did. I wish I'd have thought of this. He has more than 20 years of continuous funding, but let's read it. It says, to David Deemer, a professor of chemistry and biochemistry and acting chair of the biomolecular engineering at UC Santa Cruz, the formation of soap bubble is no mere curiosity. It illustrates an essential property of the kinds of molecules that compose the membranes of living cells. Deemer has been investigating the origins of life, look at this, for more than 20 years with continuous funding from NASA's exobiology and astrobiology programs. Man, I wish I'd have done. Can you imagine 20 years of continuous funding, your tax dollars? But here's the kicker. I wanted to ask, anybody in this room ever heard or seen, or does anybody know an exobiologist or an astrobiologist? Anybody even know what it is? Well, I'll tell you. It's exobiology and astrobiology is the study of life in outer space. So all of your money is being spent in NASA's outer space life. Where is it? Why don't we bring that money home? But this guy got a piece of it, And he's been doing this. Now watch what he did. Here's his research. It says Charles Darwin, in his letter to his friend J.D. Hooker in 1871, speculated about life beginning in this warm little pond, like I told you, where all these chemicals spontaneously resulted in life. Many scientists, however, now believe that life may have begun in extreme environments such as undersea hydrothermal vents and volcanoes, with their abundance of chemicals and energy. While many scientists have attempted to test this hypothesis in the laboratory, guys, that goes back to the Miller-Urey experiment, all these, it's been tested for years, and it's been a total flop and a failure. So he decided to go out and test it in the field. So Dr. Deamer was the first to do so in the field. But here's what he found after 20 years of continuous funding and research. The results were strikingly negative. Life did not emerge. No membranes assembled themselves, and no amino acids combined into proteins. Instead, the added chemicals quickly vanished, mostly absorbed by clay particles in the pool. Instead of supporting life, the bubbling pool had snuffed it out before it began. Later, catch this, later Deamer repeated the same experiment at Lassen Volcanic National Park in Northern California with the same negative results. Guys, this was just in 2006. So life from non-life, from this warm little pond, is totally bogus. It's wrong. It doesn't work. Darwin's theory is dead. But look at, here's the rest. This is the part that you need to watch here. It says, what went wrong? The explanation is simple. Well, since it's so simple, you guys should all know it, right? I mean, you should be being taught this stuff in classes. It says Deamer presented his findings in February at a meeting of the Royal Society of London. Conditions in geothermal springs and similar extreme environments just do not favor membrane formation. And look what he says. We have to face up to the biophysical facts of life, Deamer said. Hot, acidic hydrothermal systems are not conducive to self-assembly processes. Now, guys, that's empirical. Remember I said you can empirically. See, he empirically tested it. His grad students, other scientists could observe him. He's been doing this for 20 years. And it's great science, great research, and it concluded that life cannot arise by itself. It's over, it's done, but yet we're not letting go. So the thing that has been proven is that life doesn't come from these hydrothermal pools. That's been proven. The age of Lucy and the dinosaurs has not been proven, but yet that's what everybody hangs on to. See, it's just warped. Here's another one. Like I said, the math. This is July 2009. Protein folding was something that was observed in the Human Genome Project. You know that in that human genome, where they mapped the entire human genome, well, they left out 10,000 sequences at first, because they call them junk DNA. Now we know that's not true. But in that process, they observed protein folding. So solving the problem of protein folding has proved impossible so far. As in all bottom-up calculations, there are combinatorial explosions. For examples, by random folding the amino acid chain of the enzyme ribonuclease, a small protein could adopt more than 10 to the 40th different shapes, which would take us, scientists, take billions of years to explore that. We have no idea how it works. It's proven impossible, yet God can do it because the protein enzyme ribonuclease folds into its shape in just 2 minutes. Yet we can't even figure out what it is. So when you look at the sophistication of our human body, and think it was a random act, guys, that's just absurd. You have great faith. Well, of course I had great faith because that's what I believed in. I love this, the number 3. Look at this, just came about. This is out of the Washington Post back in June. It says there is simplicity and all-inclusiveness to the number 3. the triangle, the Holy Trinity, 3 peas in a pod. So it's perhaps not surprising that the family of man, that's all populations, is divided that way too. All of Earth's people, according to a new analysis of genomes of 53 populations, fall into just 3 genetic groups. It appears that all contemporary populations ended up largely the same or only crudely distinguishable from one another on the genome level. Guys, that tells you what God has been telling us for years. We are all one people. We are all one blood. Isn't that interesting? How many sons did Noah have? So why would we have any more than 3 genetic groups? See, it fits perfectly with what God has told us. Now, this is Dr. John A. Eddy. He's an astrophysicist, geophysicist from the High Altitude Observatory in Boulder, Colorado. Look what he says. He says, I suspect that the sun is 4.5 billion years old. Well, that's what he wants to believe. That's what I've been taught, what I taught my students. But look what he says. However, given some new and unexpected results to the contrary, and some time for frantic readjustment, I suspect that we could live with Bishop Ussher's figure for the age of the earth and the sun, which is approximately 6,000 years. He says, I don't think we have much in the way of observational, you see, empirical evidence in astronomy to conflict with it. Guys, the math actually confirms it and supports it. It does not conflict with it, and the scientists know it. But the teachers aren't being allowed to teach it. Look at this title. It's called Uprooting Darwin's Tree. This is out of New Scientist, January 2009. It says the more genomics, that's the Genome Project, bioinformatics, and many other newer disciplines reveal about life, the more obvious it becomes that our present understanding is not up to the job. See, in 2009, our present understanding of science is not up to the job to explain it. We now gaze on a biological world of mind-boggling complexity that exposes the shortcomings of familiar, tidy concepts such as species, gene, and organism. You see, the more technologically advanced that we've become, the more scientifically competent we become, the more it contradicts this spontaneous, random mutation. You see, the science supports creation. It supports God. That's why there are laws to prevent teaching creation in the classroom. See, all I want to do is teach it all. Evolution and creation, teach it all, show you all of the evidence, let you use the brains God has given you to come to the conclusion, not what I say. But if you don't have all the information, guys, you can't make a legitimate, educated decision. So if you don't believe in God, it's because you don't have all the information. If you do, you still don't have all the information on what's going on in science. Evolutionary biologist Michael Rose, now see, this is a compadre of mine, University of California. I am a evolutionary biologist from the University of California. He told us the complexity of biology is comparable to quantum physics or mechanics. Guys, quantum physics is beyond my little thought process. My brain doesn't go there. Rose goes even further. The tree of life, that's Darwin's tree of life, is being politely buried. We all know that. You see what he's saying? This is from New Scientist in January. So this isn't something I'm springing on you. This isn't something I made up. All of us, we all know that, he says. What is less accepted is that our whole fundamental view of biology needs to change. See, the scientists, the evolutionary biologists, including me, we're screaming for, let's change. Let's bring in all the information so we can really do some good science without trying to cover everything up or hide from each other. Biology is vastly more complex than we thought, he says. No kidding. And facing up to this complexity will be as scary as the conceptual upheavals of physics had to take on in the early 20th century. See, the scientific community is telling the world this. The problem is, how many of you have read that before tonight? Why? You should have already known this. See, that's the part, that's why I'm here, is just to let you know there's really some cool stuff out there. All you have to do is go look at it. This came out to October 7th, just last week. Now, folks, look at who this is by. This is from ABC News. Russell Goldman is the journalist. You can Google it and find it yourself, because a friend sent this to me yesterday, and I went on and found this article, and I was totally baffled. This is the first time in my 62 years that I've ever seen anything like this from the secular press. ABC News. It says, despite the excitement from the paleontology community, many researchers with advanced degrees, that's what I have, in science, are unimpressed by Ardipithecus, or Ardi for short, who they believe is just another ape. An ape of indeterminate age, they add, an ape who cannot be an ancestor of modern man for a range of reasons, including one of singular importance. God created man in one day, and evolution is a fallacy. I mean, can you believe that's in a secular? Hallelujah, praise God, because see, we're making a difference, because for that to get out, it shows you how desperate things are. Now, we're going to talk about, right now, really the critical part of this lecture. You see this little box that says Brave New World. This was out of Discover magazine back in April of 2006. It says soft tissue found in a dinosaur bone shocks paleontology. Guys, it didn't just shock paleontology, it just absolutely panicked paleontology. Well, let's look a little closer at this. Here is the inside. This is the article out of that. It says the most significant paleontological advance of the past 25 years was the discovery this year by Mary Schweitzer and Jennifer Whitmire of soft, flexible blood vessels and cells in the cortical bone of Tyrannosaurus rex. Guys, that is absolutely absurd. Can you imagine what would happen to a bone or a soft tissue, one of your blood cells? You know, you could put a human bone in a vacuum, seal it up, and in just a few hundred years it would turn to dust. If it doesn't fossilize, you know, if the minerals don't replace the cells, turning it to rock, it rots. It's over. It decays. Now I'm going to blow this little blue square up here. This is part of that article. Look, it says, the arrow points to tissue fragment that is still elastic. It stretches beyond belief that elastic tissue like this could have lasted 65 million years. Another instance of fresh appearance, which similarly makes it hard to believe in the millions of years. Guys, it's just impossible. And so what's happening is the scientific community is scrambling, trying to find the miracle of preservation. Boy, it would be a miracle. But here's the sad part. This lady right here, Mary Schweitzer and Jennifer Whitmire, her partner, they are great scientists. She is not a Christian, but she darn near lost her job. Peer review is how we stay honest. So when you find something and you're looking in the microscope at the soft tissue, then what you want to do is write a paper, send it out to other scientists for review. And here's what happened to her when she sent it out to a reviewer. She said, I had one reviewer tell me that he didn't care what the data said. He knew that what I was finding wasn't possible. So she said, I wrote back and said, well, what data would convince you? He said, none. Now, you see what's going on? That's just plain closed-minded dogma. That's what they accuse Christians of being. And when that guy was asked why he doesn't believe that, he said, because evolution is true and that goes against it. And he was asked, well, what makes you think evolution is true? He said, because of all the data. It's just crazy. Here's the rest of the article. It says, I am a slam dunk scientist, Schweitzer says. I would have much rather held back the paper until we had reams and reams of data. But without publishing a journal article, she says she could never have hoped for funding. See, here's what I was telling you, how money drives it. She says, without papers in science, I didn't stand a chance, she says. The saddest part about doing science in America is you are totally driven by what gets you funding. You're not driven by what gets you the truth. And she was told to knock it off and to suppress this. She didn't. Fortunately, enough people heard about it and it got out that she was able to weather the storm, but she's still being annihilated. If soft tissue can last for 65 million years, Jack Horner is her professor, and he is a great paleontologist. He says there may be lots of things out there that we've missed because of our assumption of how preservation works. James Farlow, a paleontologist at Indiana Purdue University, adds, if you can preserve soft tissue under these circumstances, all bets are off. Yeah, that means that, folks, there is a major problem. You cannot have soft tissue lasting for 65 million years. It is flat impossible. Well, the sad thing is, once that one got out, now there's a lot of these coming out. Look at this. 2009, this article comes out. The well-preserved fossil of a plant-eating hadrosaur, complete with skin and tendons, was discovered in 1999. How come we're just now finding out about it? Well, now we found some that were found back in the 80s. There's been some found all around the world, but yet you're not hearing about it. Now they're coming out. Look at this. How to Build a Dinosaur from Jack Horner's book. He just wrote this in 2008. It says, when Mary, that's Mary Schweitzer, was first working on this material, she called me up to say she had found osteocytes. Osteocytes are the things that make bone grow. I assumed she meant the spaces where the osteocytes would have been, which is what I suggested. But she said, no, Jack, I actually have the cells. And they have filopodia, and they have nuclei. And then he resorts back to her. He says, Mary, the freaking creationists are just going to love you. Well, she told him back. She said, Jack, it's your dinosaur, because he was one of the guys that helped find it. But you see, they know that they tried to put a lid on it. Here's another one. Look at this. In 1994, the winners of the race to sequence dinosaur DNA were Scott Woodward and his colleagues. Now, this was in 94. Look at this. Who published their results in the journal Science. They extracted DNA from a purportedly well-preserved dinosaur bone. You see how this is all coming out now? All the way back to 94, but it goes back further. It says, however, they were not rewarded for their victory. The sequence they discovered was not like birds, and it wasn't like reptiles. What was it like? It was exactly like a dinosaur, which is what it is. But they're trying to make dinosaurs having evolved into birds, and so when this came out, they were slammed. It says the sequence they discovered was not like birds or reptiles, but seemed unique. Since this 1994 DNA did not fit the evolutionary interpretive filter, they were raked over the academic coals. No scientist, look at this, has attempted to publish any dinosaur DNA research since that time. See how they've been suppressed? Even Mary Schweitzer has still not published. Look at this. Interestingly, Schweitzer has never published any of her purported DNA research on dinosaur tissue. Because why? She's afraid of being ostracized. Now, guys, we're going to show you this little DVD video, but this is just a wrap-up of what occurred with the Schweitzer DNA. Watch this.
In 1990, a nearly complete specimen of Tyrannosaurus rex was unearthed. Scientists from Montana State University found that these bones were not totally fossilized. Sections of the bone were like fresh bone and contain what seems to be blood cells and hemoglobin, which is a protein that makes blood red and carries oxygen. Now, they're still investigating these controversial discoveries, but common sense would say that if these bones really were tens of millions of years old, then the blood cells and the hemoglobin would have totally disintegrated by now. And the bones certainly shouldn't be fresh.
More recently, in 2002, scientists split open a T-Rex thigh bone and discovered flexible, even elastic, soft tissue meat still inside. Microscopic examination revealed fine, delicate blood vessels with what appear to be intact red blood cells and other type of cells, like osteocytes, which are bone-forming cells. These vessels were soft, translucent, and flexible.
The mummified carcass of a duck-billed hadrosaur named Leonardo also turned up in Montana. The preserved soft tissue, covering 90% of the fossil, contained muscle, nail material, a beak, and skin.
His last meal consisted of a salad of ferns, conifers, and magnolias, seasoned with pollen from 40 different plants.
This type of evidence would undoubtedly lead one to realize that dinosaurs probably aren't as old as previously thought. But for those of the evolutionary mindset, they're busy scrambling trying to prove how dinosaurs and soft tissue survived for over 65 million years. Because, of course, dinosaurs died out way before man came along, right? Right?
You see, guys, there are alternatives. What I have done tonight and this week is I've just tried to give you some examples and just kind of scratch the tip of the iceberg. But this was the picture I was showing you of National Geographic, where they put on the cover that says, "Dinosaurs Take Wing." And then inside, there was this artist's conception of how perfectly it worked. Guys, that's imagination. There is absolutely no lineage, no fossils, no nothing to give them that. They invented it to make it fit that story. When National Geographic were called on it by the curator of the National Museum of History and Smithsonian, see, look what he says right here. He says, "Truth and careful scientific weighing of evidence have been among the first casualties in their program, which is now becoming one of the grander scientific hoaxes of the age." This is the sad part. Alan Fiducia, a doctor, PhD, plucking apart the dinos. This is out of Discover magazine. Look what he says. This is about that feathered dinosaur. It says, "Archaeoraptor, which it was called, is just the tip of the iceberg. There are scores of fake fossils out there, and they have cast a dark shadow over the whole field. When you go to these fossil shows, it's difficult to tell which ones are fake and which ones are not. I have heard there is a fake fossil factory in northeast China in the Liaoning province near the deposits where many of these recent alleged feathered dinosaurs were found." Guys, that's out of Discover magazine. See, how many of you heard that before tonight? You should have all known about it. The schools should be telling people. It's just not happening. We're being led down this path because if it doesn't fit our preconceived philosophical worldview. Now remember, that was in 2000 there. This is in 2005. This is after it's been proven to be a fake. Look what this says. "My choice of the most important discovery in paleontology over the last 25 years is very much influenced by my own research interests. But I am on safe ground proposing that it has to be the excavation of the early Cretaceous deposits in Liaoning, China, where so many spectacular specimens of almost every organism is imaginable has been recovered." That's where the fossils are being faked. And yet they just won't admit it. Now, this is what I talked about earlier, Australopithecus africanus, Lucy, our nearest relative. Take a look at this fossil. This was on Time magazine, clear back in 1999. Where did that pointed head come from? How about those rounded cheekbones on it? Guys, that's all somebody's imagination. I have a friend of mine who is an artist for National Geographic. She calls all the time asking for prayer because she's being told to do those drawings to make it look like what the scientists are telling her, not what it really looks like. Look at this. The only part of that is bone is just those few little pieces. The rest of it is a mold that somebody made. And they made it to look like that because that's what they wanted it to look like. But the problem is the knee joint, which is the only bone that supposedly made this a link to the human ancestry, was found over a mile away from the skeleton and in strata 200 feet lower. Guys, that is just total fraud. It doesn't fit. It's not empirical. But when you're desperate, you will do whatever it takes. This is from Henry G. This is out of Nature magazine, which is the scientific publication for all the great scientists in the world. Look what he says. As a matter of fact, he is the editor. It says the intervals of time that separate fossils, it says it is so huge that we cannot say anything definite about their possible connection to each other or through their ancestry and descent. Each fossil is an isolated point with no knowable connection to any other given fossil. And all of them float around in an overwhelming sea of gaps. All of the fossil evidence for human evolution between 10 and 5 million years ago, several thousand generations of living creatures, can be fitted into a small box. So all of the fossils that we have to support evolution, the Darwinian evolution, the missing link, all of the fossils in the world that we have that they claim fit can be put in a small box, folks. Yet I have pictures of warehouses, you know, those rental units that you can go to, hundreds of them, completely jammed, front to back, top to bottom, with canvas bags, and the canvas bags are lead sealed with a red tag on it, and it says anomaly. Folks, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of fossils that are stored away in these warehouses because they don't fit. But the ones that do fit can be put in just one small box. Do you see how the weight is going? You know, the evolution, the creation, if it started out level, well, guys, it is totally devastated. But unfortunately, this stuff is not coming out. That's why I was honored to be able to come and just bring some of this. Here's some more of that same article. It says the conventional picture of human evolution, this is again from Nature magazine, not from some Christian. It says, is a completely human invention created after the fact, shaped to accord with human prejudices. To take a line of fossils and claim that they represent a lineage is not scientific, is not a scientific hypothesis that can be tested. Now, if it can't be tested, what is it? It's not empirical. And yet the National Academy of Sciences says if it's not empirical, it's not part of science. So this shouldn't even be part of science. And that's what he's saying. He says it can't be tested, but an assertion that carries the same validity as a bedtime story, amusing, perhaps even instructive, but not scientific. See, that's what I'm saying. Why don't we teach it all? Let you then determine which ones you believe, which you don't, and find out which ones really fit the definition of science. Now, here is the one that really gets me. The missing link. This is out of the San Jose Mercury newspaper. It says, although the team found no intact skulls, no leg, no foot, no hip bones, they said they have enough evidence to declare the creature a new species, Australopithecus ramidus. Look what they found. Researchers don't know yet if it walked upright or on all fours. All they have so far is a few dozen fossil fragments, mostly teeth, from 17 individuals. So they have a pile of broken teeth, and guys, they are claiming a new species that's in the human lineage. There is your link, a pile of broken teeth. Now, to me, that's just fraud. Now, this part really gets me. How many of you have heard of the peppered moth? The peppered moth was a moth that was used by evolutionists to convince people that evolution occurred. See, supposedly this white moth was in this area of England that when the Industrial Revolution came and the soot and the coal burning stuff darkened the trees, the moth that rested on the tree trunks was eaten by the birds, so the moth had to quickly evolve into a black moth so it wouldn't be seen. Well, the problem is there was both white and black moths were there at the same time, and it's the same moth. See, supposedly this is how it worked. Guys, they glued it onto the tree. That's how they did the research. But when the glue dried, the moth fell off. It says, finally, many textbooks include an illustration of vertebrate embryos lined up side by side. Now, these are the icons of evolution, supposedly demonstrating common ancestry. Yet, as the American Biology Teacher reports, which is the American Biology Teacher magazine that I used to get, it says, biologists have known, look at this, have known for years that these drawings were fudged to look more similar than they really are. Guys, they were faked. Roger DeHart, Mr. DeHart, wants to tell his students the truth, but the school system won't let him. When defenders of Darwinism are willing to suppress data and teach outright falsehood, you know they're in trouble. Look at this. Last April, a teacher who helped write the standard textbook for Alberta High School admitted in a Canadian newspaper that he and his colleagues were aware of the questions, the falsity of the peppered moth and that it was glued to the tree when they wrote the textbook. But look what they said. Yet they decided to include the story anyway, he explained, because of its persuasive power. It's extremely visual. He says when students are older, he said, then they can look at it more critically. Guys, do you catch what that's telling you? Let's lie to them now and hope that they don't catch on, but once they get into college and they find out, then we'll have an excuse by then. Guys, that's what we have to stop, is let's get real and call it what it is. They're both faith-based religions. Let God be true and every man a liar. Thanks, guys.